Hello everybody and welcome to VFR. Today we are looking at why you should fly the Just Flight Fokker 28. So we're here on the ramp in beautiful, not so sunny San Diego today. And we have been contracted to fly a rock star who has more money than brains and sense, who has bought a very old, very expensive, very loud Fokker 28 to use as a private jet and given it a snazzy red paint scheme. Little over the top, but it is fun, and this is a really fun classic airliner to fly. So, you know, we're using it in private jet mode, but it doesn't really matter. A little bit about the Fokker 28. This is a aircraft of Dutch origin. First introduced in the 1960s. First flight was 1967. They built over 200 of them, and they were produced from 1967 to 1987, a good 20-year run. In the United States, most notably with Piedmont Airlines, as well as Empire, which was based in New York. Generally filling the role of a regional jet, something like a CRJ or an E-jet, really, nowadays. There are multiple variants that could carry a multiple number of passengers. The initial model could carry somewhere around 50 to 65 passengers, and then upwards from there. So when we're in a 1,000 right now, the Just Flight package comes with 4 variants. You have a 1,000, the 2,000, the 3,000, and the 4,000. And I'll link you the manual for the specifics of those. But in essence, they keep making it a little bit longer and hold a little bit more people and give them different wing profiles. But this is the oldest and the crudest variant of the Fokker 28 that we're going to fly today. But they all pretty much operate the same way. So the one thing I want to draw your attention to on our little walk around here are these. These are turbojet engines. Essentially, you might be familiar with classic 737s, which have a very similar looking engine. These engines are extremely loud, powerful, but very loud. So there's a reason we don't use them anymore, but these are very much the original kind of commercial jet engines that you're familiar if you're looking at classic airplanes. So it's kind of neat, and we'll take a hear at the sounds as we fire this thing up and get going. But it's a neat little piece of aviation history. All right, so our passenger is boarded. We're here at Signature down in San Diego. We're gonna load on up, get on out of here. All right, so welcome into the cockpit of the Fokker 28. It's very much a retro jet. Your slant whiskey kind of navigation. We've got a lot of switches. It's not quite as, I would say, unuser friendly as something like the BAU 146, which is very similar by Just Flight, but definitely a very switch heavy airplane we've got. So a little bit about the EFB before we get started. I'm pulling in our flight plan from San Diego up to Tahoe. This is the route they've given us direct to Mission Bay, and then up the California coast out to Tahoe. Weather 3.10 inches of mercury. Temperature is 18 C here, and a balmy 64 degrees Fahrenheit. Wind 180 at 3. It's relatively gusty here at San Diego. A little bit of clouds too. But the weather looks pretty good at up at Tahoe. Now this airplane is, we don't have a super long runway at Tahoe, but we have about 8,500 feet, which should be no problem for this airplane. Again, this is a regional jet. It's not super heavy, high-powered. It's high-powered for its size, but again, this isn't a huge jet. So we should be able to make that work, even without reversers and some other fun quality-of-life things we might have on a modern jet. So to get set up, I'm just going to import the SimBrief OFP. That's what I do. We've loaded up with, I think, about 10 passengers. And, yeah, 10 passengers and a little bit of cargo. But again, not too much. We're simulating private jet kind of joyride and practical aircraft flying with this flight. So we'll go with that. We've got the doors open right now and chocks on. We're going to leave that for now while we get the airplane set up. You can also import your Navigraph charts. I don't know if it's set up for me yet. The aircraft menu, if you want to go set up your settings on the airplane, if you want to get your GPS up here, that's where you have all these. We can install a hush kit on our big turbofans, and that's in theory makes them quieter. We can also install a GPS down here. We're not going to use that today, so we're not going to carry it on board. All right, so we're not going to go through all of this right now, and there are tutorials out there, and I can link some. But really, what we want to do for now, we don't have external power. We could get that. We're going to turn the battery on. We shouldn't be here for too long. It's a nice clicky feel, very tactile, in moving these switches around. That's a lot of fun. It feels really good. We're going to also turn on the APU main, APU air, and one of the air conditioning systems. You can't, the APU can't run both at the same time. So this is looking pretty good. We can check out our APU stuff up here. Let's go ahead and hit the start and see if we get life on that APU. Now that we've got that started up, we can also put on the master radios on down here with these two. We're offline right now, but if we wanted to simulate it, that's COM1 and COM2 here, 122.8. We also have our nav lights here. You can see your big panel of lights for all the ones that you can think of. Really, there's not that much to setting up this plane, especially without an FMS. You don't have a ton of paperwork to do. It's just getting the APU on, getting your systems fired up, and going. I've got the door closed up, and then everything else is pretty much good to go. So we're going to run through, before starting, engines checklist, rudder, pedals, and seats adjusted, secured. The tiller is working, so the control's working. That's good. Brakes seem to be working as well. The one thing here, we need to check our brake pressure. We'll get there. Electrical power and bleed air supply is looking good. Brake pressure, we're going to look down here and see if we have any hydraulic pressure here on this system, these systems, and we don't. That means we don't have any brakes right now. So what we have to do is, and I can't remember if we have to run system 1 or system 2, but if we run the hydraulic pumps for a while and get some pressure built up, that'll allow us to run our brakes. If you don't do this before you start, you may not have any brake pressure at all. I think it's system 1 we needed to use. So brake pressure is checked. Parking brake is on. Fuel quantities are good. Those are going to be the gauges out here. We've got the brake holding, fuel quantities in here. There's nothing in the center tanks, left and right tanks look correct to me. Pressurization is set up here. We've set our cabin out, so we're going to be cruising at flight level 260 today. We are non-RVSM capable, so in the modern world, if we're not play acting, we're in the 60s or 70s. We need to keep it below flight level 290 in the US. Some nav aids. What we really need right now are two. We need the mission bay VOR on 117.8. And then we're going to want our next one, which is Echo Hotel Foxtrot, the Shafter VOR 115.4. 115.4 for the Shafter VOR. And we're going to turn both of these on to DME. So that's on. We've got the runway heading bugged as well. Good. Ship's papers are aboard. I don't think they can leave. Takeoff data down here. This card, we can either choose whatever flaps. We're going to do flaps 6 departure, and then if I click on this card, that'll set the bugs on the on our airspeed indicator here. Gust lock. We want to remove gust lock, which is this blue one right there. Again, just like the DC-6, if you don't release the gust lock, things aren't going to go well for you when you try to take off. Windows and doors are closed and locked. We are probably cleared for start at this point. So at this point, we can do our beacon, our anti-collision lights on. I don't know if mine are bound and working, but we'll put them on down there. Throttle levers are in idle position right now. Our fuel valve levers are shut. Those are these two big ones here. Boost pump switches are on. We don't have anything in the center tank, so we're leaving those off. And then the starter master switch can come on. Starter master is up on the start panel. That's this one, so we'll turn that to on. All right, to start engines, we want engine selector 2. And then we're going to go check out our indications as we start up. So hold on to, we should see the air go out as the engine fires up. And we should see it start to spool up here. We're at 10%. Once we get up to 15 to 20%, we're going to move the fuel valve lever. So we're right about there now. we're just going to bump this into the start position. We should see this igniter light blinking at us. And it should continue to climb, and just monitor that everything else is looking all right on the right-hand side. Then once it's up to 50 and stabilized, we'll put it into, and there it is. That's the electrics coming alive. And we'll put it into idle. Now we can also hear our little turbofan. Alright, now we're just going to repeat the same process for the first engine. So I'm going to get this fired up, we'll get ready for taxi, and then we'll get on our way. That's pretty much it. Alright, so finishing our cleanup of the engine, we can turn Gen 3 off. That'll turn off the APU for that. We can also turn the APU air switch off and put both air systems on now that we're feeding off the engines. The air conditioning main, AC/DC is looking good. Windshield heating is on. Pitot and vane heating. Make sure the ground crew is clear. Turn those on. Lights go out. That's nice. Hydraulic supply. We're looking, everything is in the green. So that's a good start. Electric pump switches are off and guarded. Flight control lights. I don't see anything flashing at me, yelling at me. That's good. And we will set flaps. We set flap 6 for departure right now. So let me set that once I fix my profile. Alright, so our taxi checklist flight instruments are checked and set. I am going to set our first course to the runway heading. Well, we'll bug runway heading actually, and then I want to, off of Mission Bay, we want to intercept the 320 radial outbound. So 320. And off the runway, that'll be a right turn for us to intercept that. The flight instrument is set trim. Want to make sure that we're neutral. You can see the white arrow here. And we want to be set for takeoff. Somewhere around there. We want to just make sure it's not on either side. Our collection tank indicators are black right here. You see that? Shouldn't be any other color. Flaps are set 6 degrees, and the crew briefing is, we'll call it completed. Alright, a few things before we go. We want to make sure we're lit up, so landing lights, everything extended and on. So taxi light should have been on, but that's okay. We're going to turn our transponder on. We're going to squawk 2000. Make sure that's going. We want to make sure that our lift dumpers are armed before we take off on the roll. We want to check brake temperature and make sure that our yaw damping switch is in. This is also how we're going to turn on the autopilot once we get up into the air. So a little bit about the takeoff here. We're going to essentially advance full power. They're going to call takeoff power. We're going to fly runway heading, climbing up to 10,000 feet, and we'll make the right-hand turn once we feel comfortable to intercept the Mission Bay VOR. Now on the climb out, we're going to turn on autopilot with this switch here. There's a couple ways we can use autopilot. We can use it in a speed climb kind of mode with IAS button here. We can also use it in a pitch mode, which is controlled by this little thing. I have that bound to my flap lever on my Honeycomb Bravo, so I can adjust that without looking down there. But that's how we'll do that, and we can set heading until we get the localizer, or until we get the pick up the radial, and then we can go to beam mode when we're ready for that. And the other thing we want to set on the flight director, I'm going to set the pitch command to 10 degrees up, like so, and we're going to set it to the heading and turn. We don't really want altitude. Hold on. So we'll leave that off. But basically, those are independent systems, unlike other airplanes. So the flight director can show you one thing, the autopilot will do the other. This controls the flight director. Right now we're in pitch mode. This is just going to display 10 degrees up, nose up, and fly the heading we've selected, which off the runway is heading 29 something, 296. All right, here we go. I'm going to slowly advance the power. We're rolling. Again, we're going to rotate around 120. 130. Shouldn't take us long to get there. And the airplane should just lift off the ground very nicely. We have positive rate. Gear coming up. I'm going to bring it back into a climb power configuration. And we're going to follow the flight director to follow that heading. Flaps coming up too. Now we're going to have to be very mindful of our power and speed to stay below 250 knots. This will speed off on you. The airspeed indicator is small on your screen, so it can absolutely be hard to see. All right, so I'm going to start by engaging autopilot. And we'll ask autopilot to climb out at this speed on our prescribed heading. And I'm going to reset our flight director pitch command. All right, so we've been climbing out well and upward 8,000 feet. We're going to turn right now to intercept our radial outbound, the 319, I believe is what it says. And we're going to fly this course a long way. 320 is what it is. It's sitting right there. Now, there is some strategy to managing all these parts of the system. You have both your nav radios up here, so you can control that pretty well. But you don't have like a standby on this side. You can also set a course for both if you want to, and then you can switch between with these two buttons. So I can pick nav 1, I can throw it into nav 2, which we're not picking anything up, or I can go into standby. And here on our HSI, you can see our DME. So we're 7 miles from Mission Bay. We're going to intercept that radial once it comes in. And the altitude is now captured at 10,000 feet, so that's good. We're going to reset a little bit, give it a little bit more power. As you climb out, you'll need to give the engine a little more power to maintain your climb speed. We're going to continue the climb to our cruise altitude of 260. So again, all this works pretty well. It's pretty robust. It feels pretty good to use. It feels relatively intuitive. But it's not necessarily, there's a lot more components that you have to individually manage when compared to a regular autopilot on your, your latest and greatest tube liner. And seeing that, so we're seeing the radial start to come in on our HSI, so we're going to hit beam mode, and it's going to follow the beam outbound. Now, if it loses the beam, it's going to revert to roll mode and just keep pointing the direction it was pointing, so just have to keep an eye out for that. I'm also going to reset our heading to more or less match our course. Now, we should be on this for about 187 miles. So we're going to need to keep an eye out for nav 2 to come up over here on this DME. This will show you the one that's not selected. This one's the one that is selected. All right, so we're climbing out. Let's do after takeoff checklist. Landing gear up, flaps up, lift dumpers are in, disarmed. All of our engine stuff looks fine. We want to retract our landing lights, takeoff lights, and taxi lights. Or our landing, taxi lights, and whatever else we had extended. Anti-ice is in auto. Pressurization, it looks like it is pressurizing. Seatbelt signs are on, and that will do it for now.
Alright, so we are in the cruise now. We had to pull power back a little bit. I'm starting to hit the barber pole. But at cruise, and you will have to manage the throttle a little bit. Just find that sweet spot to make sure that you're not overspeeding while not dipping speed too much. So you'd have to play that game a little bit. But overall, we're up and ready to go. We're about 60 miles now from the Mission Bay VOR. Well on our way. We'll see when we get the next one up, but just came in. 124 miles now from, and I forget what the next one is, Echo Hotel Foxtrot, the Shafter VOR in Bakersfield. So why should you fly the Fokker 28? I think if you have any interest in this kind of old school VOR to VOR jet airliner navigation, this is a fun plane that you can get in and go. It's reliable. It works. It has a really nice sound and feel, especially the switches. I always like a good sounding switch, and this is definitely a plane with those good sounds. So it feels clunky. It feels satisfying when we switch them. I prefer the twin engine to something like the BAE 146. Again, very similar aircraft of similar quality levels, but those would be the two big ones if you want a big jet that can do this kind of classic VOR to VOR type flying. And it's very, very much practical. This airplane has a lot of tools that I think make this easier than something like the DC-6, where you're kind of going between different areas of the cockpit. This panel is definitely an evolution on that. It gives you a lot of it gives you better visibility, and all these controls are kind of at the same panel on your fingertips to get you to the VOR in the way you want. So it's also a good one if you want to kind of master that style of flying without some of the challenges associated with other aircraft. So it's a good fun classic one. The model is great, the sounds are fun, and it's got a lot of depth. I don't think that I utilize all the depth that much. But if you really wanted to become a Fokker 28 driver and really dig into the systems, Just Flight's done a good job of implementing that into the model. And so there's a lot of options. Very good. You could make this, you could do a lot with this airplane. I tend to fly it as a change of pace from the Slant Lima stuff, get out of the 737, get into this, and do a kind of old school flight. But again, lots of nuance, especially with engine performance and your takeoff parameters. A lot of stuff you can dig into. Just Flight has a really good manual that you can get into. So it's a fun plane. You get the different variants. Again, if you're doing commercial flying, a lot of the times I'll fly the 4000. But the Stubby 1000 is good too. You're not going to do a ton of long hauls, but it's set up for that regional flying, which has all the benefits of being a lot of flights under an hour, under 2 hours, into big airports, into small airports, really wherever you want to go. Definitely very capable in that regard. And you can get a GPS if you want a GNS 530. You can get that too. So you can do all that Slant Lima stuff if you really want to. So what do you need to know to get the most out of this plane? I think, really, they have a really good package with everything in here that you need to know. You can follow the checklist and do a halfway decent job of getting this airplane into the air and on an airway and flying to your destination. So that's very good, but you can dig into a lot of detail in the manual. So you can check that out if you do want to get into it. And the other thing is just the foundational knowledge of VOR to VOR flying. This could be a good training platform for that. I would go up in a smaller plane and really understand that and how that all operates. What the, your receive ranges are, what your HSI is telling you. You can certainly learn that in this plane, but it's going to be fast, and there's some other stuff going on. Where if you do it in a 152, it'll slow the game down a lot, and you can focus on that part of it. But that's the big one is understanding the VOR nav, and then getting familiar with the autopilot. It's not difficult. It's relatively intuitive, especially for an old school kind of setup. However, it does take a little bit of adjustment from your traditional Slant Lima autopilot suite. All right, so let's talk through the rest of our flight. We're coming up on the Shafter VOR now, and then it's going to be another 180 miles up to Linden. Once we hit Linden, we're going to be heading up to Tahoe via the LDA approach for runway 18. So essentially we're going to go into the initial approach fix at Palisades. That's going to be 13.2. Fly that 059 outbound, per the chart, 16 miles, until we hit the this point Kings here and pick up the LDA DME into Lake Tahoe. It's not going to get us that close. It's offset and a little far. So hopefully the weather will remain good. We've got some relatively high minimums, but that should be fine. But we do have these frequencies here, which we'll put in with an offset of 5.5 degrees. So that puts us at 12,400 feet at Kings. So what we've done is come into here and put that into our top of descent calculator in the FB. Our target altitude at 12,400. We're currently at 26. So we want to descend 43 miles before we get down there to the 3-degree angle. Not crazy. So about 50 miles before we'll start our descent. And that should be, if I'm just roughly estimating it, a little bit after we turn towards the Palisades VOR. Other than that, we got a little off in the transition between the two VORs. Now we're going to keep tracking 320 outbound until we get this one. We have Linden in, and that's going to be a heading of 318 once we cross. So not a big change, but heading 318. Everything else looking good. Speed is holding pretty well, just gently making small adjustments to get in there. Checking out our landing performance, we're probably going to plan for the flaps 25 approach. That VREF of 120, which we can click on, and that will update the bugs here on our airspeed indicator. Alright, so we've crossed the Shafter VOR, updated 320 to 318 on the course here. Now we've got the courses lined up. We're about 15 miles past. So we're going to wait for Linden to come up on here, and then around the midpoint we'll aim to switch over. Again, 45, 50 miles before we really get onto the LDA approach. We want to be down at 12,400 feet. And we'll set that when we get in there. So far, though, everything looking good. All right, we're coming up on Linden now. We've entered the cone of confusion. Now we want to go heading 014 off of here until we pick up Palisades. So I'm going to set that up, and I'm going to set up the heading. We go 014, a little behind where I want to be, but that's okay. We'll also arm beam mode, so we'll capture that when we come across. And we got Palisades on 02, really 40 miles from the Palisades VOR, which is about 35 miles from Linden. We're going to want to come downhill and start our descent down to about 13,000 feet. All right, we're coming up on 35 miles now. Going to start our descent, and it just came in 40 miles away. We're going to start our descent down to 13,000. So I'm going to set the altitude capture to 13,000. And then we're going to just basically full power. So we slow down to about 280. We're probably around there anyway. If we need to silence the horn, we can do that. We'll hit IAS and pull power out, and that'll help. We're targeting about 2,000 feet per minute based on our calculator. I'm just going to adjust power to reach that. And again, we're on nap 2, 11 point something, 10.9 miles from Palisades, and then the outbound course from Palisades is going to be 059 for 16 miles. At that point, we should get the DME coming in too. We'll fly that in. The other approach here into Tahoe is a RNAV approach. Conditions are good enough that we could do a visual if we get set up in the right spot. So I'm not too worried about it. But if it was really truly IFR, we would have a tough time getting in. But it's part of the fun challenge of this this style of aircraft. Alright, so we're capturing altitude. We're going to let the speed come back now here. And we're pretty close now to making the turn. Again, 16 DME. We're going to make the right-hand turn. To 171. It's going to be right about there. Let's bring the speed back. 250 knots. That's 15 nautical miles. Now we're going to hit the heading mode and shift it over there. And then I'm going to kick it into nav 1 too. Now nav 1, we're not going to get a glide slope on this approach. If we had an ILS, we could get a glide slope, but we do not have that capability on the LDA. So we're going to kick it to heading and begin our descent manually based on the DME. The next one is 10,200 feet at the 12 DME. So 10,200 at 12 DME. We're going to bring speed back. Again, I wish it would stay silenced, but it doesn't really. And keep the right turn going to pick up that course. We're a little bit right of where we want to be, so let's keep an eye out for the terrain too. This approach is, we're actually supposed to be on the other side, so we should have started the turn earlier. That said, we should have plenty of room, and the altitude's not a huge concern. Airport's going to be down there in the snowy area. We're basically making a long straight in. I'm going to arm beam mode. We're at 17 DME. We're going to manage our altitude on our own. And the field is going to be at about 6,200 feet. I'm going to turn off the flight director, but set the pitch up in case we have to go around. We're starting to capture the beam now, so it should make the turn, and it will. And I'm going to leave that in because that's part of the missed approach. Alright, and now I'm going to take control because this airplane is a joy to hand fly. I need to bind to this button, the horn silencer. It's in the manual. They say, yeah, if it's bugging you, silence it. But we do need to start losing some altitude. We're at 12.4 and we're about 1,000 feet too high. And let it start to catch. The next mark is going to be a 9 DME. We need to be at or above 9,500. And the airport should be in that valley there. I think I can see the runway. But it's snowy, so it might be tough. We do have speed brakes that we can put out to help lose some speed. Generally, these are going to be used in landing, but we are coming in a little bit hot. So now, out or above 8,800 here, at 7.4 DME, there's the runway. We're going to pull power back. Our descent rate is a little steep. So we're going to arrest that, lose some speed, and then start putting out gear and flaps. I'm now visual to the runway too, so I'm lining it up. We're a little to the left of our course, but remember this is an offset approach. So we may need a little power now. Speed brake in. gear coming out. We'll bring out our first notch of flaps. Again, we're going to do flaps 25. Which is going to be a few notches. Now, this plane is pretty, I don't want to say it's easy to land. But it's not the most difficult thing. We're going to arm. Lift dumpers, our throttle switches are in takeoff. Everything else looking good. And now we're just going to kind of keep it on final approach speed. This might take a little power back in. Not let the bottom fall out. And just kind of get that descent rate between 500 and 1,000 feet. As we go flaps 25 now. Now, once we're over the threshold, we're going to put out our speed brakes, and that is part of the procedure before we touch down. So we don't have any reversers. We just have some, you know, our braking, our normal brakes, and our speed brakes, which are going to come out. We want to hold our VREF of about 117, so we could slow down even a little bit more to get on that. And I'm not looking at the runway, but we're pretty close. Nappies are showing me a little low. We're configured, flaps 25. And it feels slow down here at our approach speed. And we're basically going to hold this in. There's the marker. Now it's going to yell at me. I don't know if there's a way to configure it so that it doesn't yell at you when you're doing this flap configuration. We're getting a little fast. I'm going to bring some power back. This airplane will float too if you let it. We're over the threshold now. Speed brake's coming out. Cut power. And just set it down. A little left to center line. A little tough, but it shouldn't take too much braking action. Not going all the way on. You can overheat the brakes. So we're just going to gently let it roll out to the end. And then we'll turn into Tahoe. I don't actually know if they have jet fuel at Tahoe. I assume they do, but I don't know. So welcome to Reno Tahoe Airport, everybody. That's a fun approach. Again, it's pretty stable. It's not super bitey on approach. You can kind of fumble and play with the speeds a little bit, and it's not an airplane that's going to kill you like the DC-6 will. So in that respect, it's somewhat forgiving, and I think it's a fun plane to fly. It hand flies nice. It hand flies, again, stable. You're not on the knife edge. But it's also, you know, you can do some of these pretty technical approaches. Alright, so on the ground here at Tahoe, we're going to start with the, maybe what we'll just turn on like external power. So coming in here, we can put chocks, ground power. Once it's ready, we can hit it on. And we'll kill the engines. So thank you all for coming along. I hope you've enjoyed this flight out to snowy Lake Tahoe in our Fokker F28. It's a good airplane. It's a really fun airplane. If you're looking for something else like it, the other one is another Just Flight product. The Just Flight BAE 146 is another add-on with a bunch of configurations. It's got 4 jets, 4 small jets instead of 2, but a lot of the same things I say about this apply to that airplane too. in this same genre, if you're looking for classic aviation, the DC-6 is kind of a little earlier, but still comparable era. And the other one that may be worth taking a look at is the FlySimWare Lear 35. I haven't flown that one personally, but if you're looking for more of a steam gauge, smallish jet, that is certainly one to consider on the list. So thank you all for watching. If you have any questions, comments, other planes that you enjoy flying, drop in the comments section below. Usually do all the YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, helps the channel a ton, and I really appreciate it. It was a good flight today. I really appreciate y'all coming along, and we'll see you on the next one. Take it easy, y'all.